Welcome to Use Your Items, a video game podcast about the philosophy and design of the video games that you and I sometimes enjoy. With me, as always, is our ever stalwart companion, Francisco Martin. Fran, what is going on?
Hello, voice in my head. How are you doing?
I think that you're terrible, and you should turn off this recording right now, and you should delete everything on your hard drive.
You say that sounds more like Kojima being the voice in my head, telling me to turn off the podcast. That was
Yeah, right. Turn off the podcast.
If Kojima made a video game about a nun sneaking around, hey, we're talking about INDIKA today.
We are talking about indie darling INDIKA.
Oh my god, do you think they did that on purpose?
No, but what I do think is I have a feeling it will show up at least once on our live restream of the Indie Game Awards on December 19th, I believe, is when we're doing that.
Yeah. That dates the episode, and the episode is not coming out before then. So if you're listening to this and you didn't catch us on the stream, sorry.
Oh yeah, that's right. We're always behind versus when they listen. That's so funny. Anyway, check out our Discord. There are events posted there where we will post our streams and stuff like that. And next time you may be able to catch in the new year, because that's when I think this is coming out, our one of our future streams. But
it'll be perfect for Three Kings Day, another religious holiday. But let's hit it with a behind the box. How about that?
Okay, so let's start with the behind the box. Fran and I were talking before this episode started, and he said, I feel like this episode's going to go as long as you want it to go, because this is a Jason game. And he's 100% right, audience, and you're all here, and you're stuck here with me, or you can stop the podcast playing.
This is Jason's world. We're just living in it.
For now. For the next however long I got you, you're stuck in the ring with me. Okay, I'll read the behind the box.
Sure.
INDIKA. Ask and you shall be deceived. INDIKA is a third-person, story-driven game set in a strange world where religious visions clash with harsh reality. It tells the story of a young nun who sets off on a journey of self-discovery with the most unusual, horn-headed companion by her side. On the outside, INDIKA seems to be a typical nun attempting to adjust to a difficult and monotonous monastery life. Humble and innocent in her appearance, do not be deceived, as this young girl has also made a highly unlikely acquaintance, as she speaks with the devil himself.
Short, sweet, and that's all you kind of need to know. Honestly, I think our spoiler-free section is probably going to be kind of light on the story, the plot, and the characters' arcs. Just because I guess we'll say right now, this game is like 4 hours long, so
super short, very digestible. Especially if you are stuck on an airplane over the Pacific Ocean for 10 hours. You can play this game, get freaked out, fall asleep, wake up, play it again. You're good to go.
Is that how you played it?
I played 3 hours of it on the airplane back to New England, on the airplane back to Logan. Yeah. So
I think this behind the box is probably going to be most of the story. I guess we can get you of the plot. I guess it mentioned that it was actually it didn't say that it was in Russia. So this is very somewhere in Russia. It's very Orthodox Christian,
Eastern Orthodox.
Eastern Orthodox, yeah, because there's a lot of you need to very specify that because they're very different if you don't specify that.
I don't think it's Catholic because I don't know. I'm not very well versed on the differences between the iconographies and stuff like that, but
if I remember correctly, because I was raised Catholic, it was one of those things where Eastern Orthodox has a lot more, if you could even imagine, rigidity and much more structure and much more emphasis in tradition and holy relics. Like the Catholic Church has all that, sure. The Eastern Orthodox goes even further than that.
Gotcha.
To the point that some of the reasons why Catholicism thinks that all other Christianities are divergent from the path, but specifically Eastern Orthodox, just because they are put so much importance in very specific figures and relics. So
Yeah.
it's Catholic too, Electric Boogaloo.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I was also raised Catholic, and so there was definitely some elements here that I felt were very almost reminiscent or somewhat reflective of that sort of religious experience I had growing up as well.
Yeah.
So I guess since it's kind of, I brought the game to the show and it was kind of my impetus that we cover it, I wanted to give my pitch for why I brought it here. And so,
Gotcha. Hit it.
number one, the game is 4 hours long.
A great reason to play any game.
Yeah. When you have a podcast and you got to record regularly and you have to play the games that you're recording on, rip Banjo-Kazooie, playing short games is a blessing. And so it was a short game. It was an indie game. And truly, the cover art I found extremely just gripping. Like
The graphic design of this game is crazy.
Yeah,
It goes hard.
This game really makes me feel like it's showcasing what Unreal 4 can absolutely do, and then some. So I really didn't know much more about it than you probably did. And then when I was doing research for, I think it was Metal Gear Solid 2, I think I was watching a Super Bunny Hop video or some other video on it, and they referenced INDIKA. Either that or I was watching a Noah Caldwell-Gervais video, and he referenced INDIKA. Somebody I watched a video of referenced the game, and they were talking about how it's this nun who's going on this journey and she's experiencing a crisis of faith. I don't think that's too much of a spoiler, really. It's a story about an Eastern Orthodox nun. Like, I mean, we kind of know where this is gonna steer usually. So I had heard about it. I knew it came out this year. It was an indie title, and I like trying to catch indie titles in a year over like the AAA stuff if I can help it. So it kind of aligned with my interests, and yeah, I just wanted to jump. I think it was also a pretty good palate cleanser between like coming off of Nier, and then we get really weird. And our next game is Final Fantasy VII Remake. Rebirth or whatever that's called.
So a good tempoing between the two big games, having two
huge Japanese RPGs, JRPGs or whatever you want to call them, and then you have this very strange like Russian indie game.
Which also kind of is an RPG, and I'll jump in here and talk a little bit about the game itself. What are you doing in the game? So the game is it's a very interactive cinematic experience, and I know that cinematic experience gets thrown around a lot with any game that has a lot of cutscenes. This one, I think you need to emphasize interactive cinematic, because honestly, the game doesn't have that many cutscenes. A lot of its storytelling is told when you're walking around and like looking around the world. The voice in your head, the devil himself, is doing narration about not the whole game. They use it very sparingly, where honestly, I kind of wanted more, but I'm glad that they didn't use it more, because otherwise it would have cheapened it. So they use it a very moderately, but very well. So it's very interactive cinematic experience. And the key, I guess, mechanics, if you can call them that, is there's a variety of platform puzzles. Few things of like, oh, I need to move this here, or I need to go there first before going here, stuff like that. But the thing I wanted to mention, the big thing that I wanted to mention, was the faith-based level up system.
Let's go.
Amen. This is such a, and this is where the RPG elements come in, because the level up system in this game is so amazing. It's actually, it is a really good parody of what gaining experience sometimes feels like in games, and such a perfect marriage of that with the life of a nun, which is a very usually mundane experience. experience in this game, and the game tells you very early on, does not matter. It does not matter how much experience you get.
I love that line so much. The game literally says to the player, these points don't matter, your levels don't matter.
Yes.
I chase that one.
But yes, exactly. That's the thing. The dopamine hits, the sound effect that it gets whenever you do.
Really well done.
Whenever the game starts in the first 15 minutes, you are forced to fill a water bucket 5 times just walking. It takes you like 15 minutes to walk back.
Painstakingly long. It's so slow.
So long. But every time you fill that bucket, you get the sound effect and you are like, yes, I must fill this water bucket. Nothing else matters in this world except raising my level and filling up this water bucket. And by the way, just so that if you're questioning, wait, but what do the levels actually do? They don't do anything. Everything that you get, there's a skill tree. It's more like a skill line.
Grid.
It's a sphere grid where it'll have you choose between 3 or 4 different types of upgrades. And all the upgrades are like, get 10 experience points now, or multiply the experience you get, or have a chance to multiply your experience. What is a chance? Who cares? Who knows? The points don't matter. Just pick a thing and move matters. On. Oh, what a good Ludo narrative resonance of how sometimes it feels going through some of the bad games and some games that have RPGs that just feel like an afterthought. Their level up system just feels like an afterthought. And they took that and it's like, okay, that afterthought, we're going to make it the main thought of our game. And this is not to say that it's bad in this game and that I like the whole point of this game is not that level up system. So it's fine that it is this straightforward and this like mundane, so to speak. Like it's great. I love it.
I think for like what you said is so true. And I want to take that element of the gamification, the RPGification of, I guess, her person of INDIKA's personal like faith journey. And dear listener, I do want to state it's shame, trauma, past trauma. It's like all of these level up goals, like you hit a level up and you get to assign a skill point. It's like you're just assigning additional shame and contempt and yeah.
And the only good one, the only one that has maybe some level of like positive, like all of them are grief, shame, and all these things. One of them is humility. And that one is like, okay, humility, that one is a neutral term, right? Like it doesn't necessarily like, it isn't like shame or grief or these things which have negative connotations. But here's the thing, humility is the worst level thing. It's like, get 2 points now. And if you're a gamer, you're not going to ever pick that one. That one is bad. It's so bad. And so it doesn't get
the most humble one to take.
Yeah, it is the most humble, but I'm not here for humility. I'm here to win at doing absolutely nothing.
Well, if you want to level up faster, then you want to take shame, which gives you a % chance to get additional point, or it gives you additional points every time you get points.
Exactly.
So clearly you're going to take the exponential option, and everyone knows that shame and trauma will exponentially increase your ability to level up through life. No,
exactly.
For me, I really appreciated that level up system tied directly into what the game is teasing at, which is this gamification of religion, in which the terms and conditions, the rules that are set out in a religion that are meant to be sort of all-encompassing and divine are at odds with the logical, rational nature of humanity, in which the game spends so much time deliberating on these minutia of religious like loopholes and corner cases of is it holy to do this, is it unholy to do this, is it sinful to do that, is this good, is this bad, what are these words good, bad, sin, virtue, all of this mean? And at the same time all this is happening, INDIKA is leveling up through her religiosity, and it achieves nothing, much like the conversations that are happening in this story are also equally achieving nothing. So
Yeah.
there's like a real nihilism at the center of this game that is like just like achingly droll and hilarious and
Yes.
doing its best to kind of show you on its face what it's like, what it thinks of religion and how it's interpreting it. I was very impressed with the reflective qualities of all of its little tiny pieces of game design here.
Yeah. And you mentioned humor. The humor in this game is very dry, very like it is so dark. The whole game is so like
Yes.
pessimistic. So whenever there is like they're not even jokes. They're just like WTF moments like okay,
I have
what?
to
And
laugh
then
or I'll
you
cry.
yeah, you have to laugh or you'll cry type deal and they do a great job at that, which by the way we've said I guess we haven't mentioned that this is a Russian developer or previously Russian developer. We'll talk about that in the game development history and so the game is in English. Well, you can play the game in Russian as well, but they got voice actors to do an English dub, and the voice acting amazing. They do a
So
great
good.
job at selling to everything. I love the devil's voice. The devil's voice is so like innocent, but obviously prodding. Like it isn't very obvious that like he almost convinced me that he wasn't the devil.
Right. It's one of the best. I think it's probably one of the best sort of devil renditions that I've heard in acting. I do kind of hold close to my heart that I feel like the devil voice in my head is voiced by James Spader, but that's between me and my God, clearly. And so the voice acting's phenomenal. To your earlier point about being an interactive cinematic experience, this more so than The Last of Us or God of War 2018 or Uncharted 4 in particular, feels more like a game that is extremely interested in cinematography and
Yes.
creating shots that feel like movies in ways that these other typically considered cinematic games don't feel like they really are scratching the pale. They're not crossing the pale whatsoever. And INDIKA is like pulling these unbelievable shots and forcing the player to game through those shots to pull the camera back into reality. And I like there's one scene in particular where the camera just pans super deep into this space to frame INDIKA as like a silhouette in this very brightly lit room, and she's just showing as this very solitary, lonely figure in this bright white space, and she's just this flat black figure. And it took me I probably looked at it for like 2 minutes before I realized I was like, I'm not waiting for somebody to speak. I the game has started. Like I've had control of INDIKA this whole time, and I have to move her to get the camera to swing back in. And it's the developers really just took so much love and care to creating these extremely like filmic shots that just feel so natural in the game. And it's I was very impressed. I thought having played through stuff like Uncharted 4, it's like maybe the cinematography we should be achieving and pointing towards and working towards in games isn't like Mission Impossible action sequences, but it's like the really quiet, structured shots of the Coppolas and the and the Bergstroms and all that stuff. It's maybe that's where we should be pushing. And I think the 4-hour runtime of this game is directly helping that experience as well. It lets them really compress everything.
And it's not just the cinematic experience from an artistic standpoint, even also from an technical standpoint. There are so many times where the game very intelligently puts the camera in such a way just to hide imperfections in gameplay. For example,
Really?
a big one, water. They did not want to do water physics. The water physics, if you actually like force the camera to look at the water physics, it's pretty bad. It's like 15 frames per second. But every time there's like the bucket scene, whenever she's pouring the water, she's in the way of the pouring of the bucket. The camera naturally puts the
cool.
camera in certain spots to kind of be like, this doesn't look that good. We didn't take enough time to up-res the texture of this, so we're gonna nudge the player to not look at that. You can still look at it if you like try to like
you control the camera, but
the director is really much like let's push you, and you need to kind of gamify to find all the like Easter eggs, the technical like limitations, because the game looks fantastic.
It's really gorgeous. It's like really impressive looking game.
So that's one technical thing. The other technical thing, and this is a very anecdotal personal thing, I have an ultra wide, and the game at 240 FPS on an ultra wide, ooh baby, it's
I also have an ultra wide, and it ripped.
It rips. The only bad thing is that there are some cutscenes that were not rendered in ultra wide, so it does put black borders in the left and right. I was like, so close, but it doesn't happen that often, so it's fine. It looks nice.
Yeah, I played probably 30 to 40 minutes of it on my PC, and then I played the rest of it on Steam Deck. It was great on Steam Deck. It ran like a dream. It looked beautiful. It wasn't
crazy.
like the best experience. It would definitely be better if you could play in surround sound with like really beautiful audio, or like a really nice. I had like earbuds in, so I recognize that I probably didn't get like the most premier experience, but I still felt pretty impressed by what I saw.
Yeah.
It's just like really, I'm glad that you feel like the stuff going on behind the scenes of this like incredibly opaque and sort of like needlessly just, I don't want to say it is nihilistic, but it's just like so it's like reserved.
Yes.
I'm trying to think of the word. It's like the story very much at all points in times is a story that is so interested in the idea of hope, and yet at the same time it feels like it's completely given up any chance of hope whatsoever.
Yes.
So it's like constantly riding this razor's edge of just like strident faithfulness to religion and what that will get you versus, you know, the reality of this cold, dark, fucked up world that everybody's in.
Yeah. I think that this game did, like you said, I was impressed even from a design and technical perspective. There are a few things in the design that were a little bit unfortunate. One of them we'll have to wait till spoilers, but the thing that doesn't need to wait for spoilers is going back to the puzzle platforming. Whenever you're doing puzzle games, it's very important for the player to have some level of repetition. What you don't do, or what you give the player, the tools you give the player but don't use as part of the solution to a puzzle, is sometimes just as important in the decision making as a designer. But given that the puzzles in this game are so there's a huge variety of them, and they're not really repeated, such that now the problem with that then becomes that they need to teach you how to solve the tools that you have for every puzzle. And so unless they're being an asshole and giving you a red herring, you know that you need to use all the controls they're giving you. There's a one point in the game later on where you're solving this puzzle, and there's a tool like on the bottom right, it kind of buries the lead in saying like, oh, press this button to do this. And I'm like, well,
right.
Now I know that I'm gonna need to do that, and that kind of tells me how to solve the puzzle altogether. Like, I know that you're not playing this game really for the puzzle platforming, but it kind of begs the question of maybe they could have maybe repeated some of the types of puzzles that they were doing instead of doing many different puzzles, so that way there was some challenge in some of the places. So yeah, there was a little bit of man, it feels like they were trying, like they went in breadth of puzzle design instead of going in depth of puzzle design, and I think I would have rather the latter.
Yeah, very opposed to something like, and I haven't played The Witness, but I feel like
I love The Witness.
I feel like I know an infinite amount about The Witness, so I feel confident saying that The Witness is a game that is very much interested in building on small steps to get you to
Yes.
very complicated solutions. And this is a game that's really more about like the nuance of each puzzle. And I think in some ways showing off their creativity as designers, but also I think because all of the puzzles are Indica, right? So it's all about her ingenuity. So I think it's I think a lot of it is trying to show off precisely what makes Indica tick, like what makes her her, and show off something that you don't get by leveling up your shame and your trauma. So I think I do think that almost all of all of the story stuff is in service, or all of the design stuff is really in service of the narrative here. There's not a lot that they're really there. I don't think any of their design space is groundbreaking in the sense of people will copy this or anything like that.
I almost think there's one design, but unfortunately, it'll have to wait till a spoiler section.
Okay.
So I'll tell for the people who in the spoiler free, there is one design narrative puzzle that I was shocked by. I was like, this is so ingenious that I kind of wish the whole game was this. This is
really
like, this is not from a design only perspective, but what it means in the narrative, the design of it. So when we get to spoilers, we will get there, but there was one puzzle that I was like, oh my god,
put a pin in that. I definitely want to talk about that.
I wish this was the whole game. I wish that this made use of this more. So yeah, so it'll come around.
Okay, cool.
But for those who are waiting for the spoiler free section, this podcast is probably gonna be half the playtime of the game. So
yeah, so I think we should endeavor here to move towards game development. I really want to know what you found in your research on Odd Meter and 11-Bit Studios and all of this stuff, so that way we can get right into the spoilers, because I think...
So a little bit of the nitty-gritty. It was released May 2024. I think that this has beaten Signalis as the game that we have most recently done a podcast on since release. I think Signalis was around, 6 or 7 months, and it's been around 6 or 7 months since the release of this, so I'd have to double check. So it's published by 11-Bit Studios. It's a Polish company. It's former CD Projekt Red and some company called Metropolis Software. I'm not sure about that one, but CD Projekt Red is well known and well loved, infamous and famous. Well known, infamous and famous.
They're well known.
Just for that, more about
Very
11-Bit
well
Studios. They did this War of Mine, which was I never got to play it, but it's an indie darling from early. That I'm glad that there's somebody. Thank you for pulling the way for carrying
That's
gotcha.
Really a game you just need to
it,
play maybe once.
I'll put it to the list.
that's a very
but
heavy
not
game.
To say that might paint a picture of that's the type of game they do, Indica and this War of Mine. That's not true at all. In fact, most of the 11-Bit Studio games are a lot more, not generic, but a much more in line with normal game industry. Like, for example, Frostpunk is another one that is a lot of people really liked. Yes, actually. It came
the sequel
recently-ish. I think in last year. It was this year? Wow. Okay, so
it was this year. I'm fairly certain it was this year.
So all this to say, Indica seems a bit outside of their comfort zone, even though this War of Mine is probably in that same place. It was developed by Odd Meter, which continues their graphic design all the way to web design. Their website is primo. It has a very creepy background, like ticking noise of like an actual like a metronome, and that kind of was very unsettling. Odd Meter, though, as a studio, seemed to be a meme. Like, they love to make these types of games that are like weird and like out there. I'm gonna just read some of their descriptions for both their only other game, The Archer's Tale, Indica, and their unannounced title. So this is what they say. This is how they try to say The Archer's Tale. The only singing VR archer simulator. And there is also a half-naked guy hanging chained and moaning. You can ride an elephant shooting at the martinettes. At the end, a fight with a dragon to touching music. Awesome game, if you know what I mean.
I love that. I want them to write all of our podcast
I would
descriptions.
pay them. Like Cameo, like, hey, INDIKA, we will not to bury the lead, has done pretty well, so they probably don't need the money, but for INDIKA, they say a nun meets an escaped convict and off we go. Although the game is not about that, of course. It's about devil in your head. You solve puzzles, play pixel minigames, yeah! Enjoy the fucked up world of an alternate Russia of the late 19th century. Which is a little bit more spoilers than I would have given, but they gave it, so I'm just gonna leave it there.
I agree.
And the last one, they have an unannounced game in production, and it says, we haven't announced it yet, but when we do, it will fucking blow your minds.
So confident. We love a confident developer.
Yeah, super confident. Like I said, they're a Russian studio, or used to be a Russian studio, because even though their development of INDIKA was rather straightforward, there was a bit of a hiccup. Content warning for war. The war in Ukraine happened while they were in development of INDIKA. They were living in Russia. This was before the Polish company, who is Polish, just in general, Poland, is very supportive of Ukraine and like stopping Russian pushing. So this kind of put them in an awkward situation of like, okay, we're we're now funding this company who is Russian, like in Russia, and there's this war going on. To 11-bit's credit, they were like, no, you take the time you need. We support you guys. This contract, we will obey. It will not obey. Well, they will obey, but they will follow our agreement, and we will continue to publish this game. So good, hats off to them. The studio head, the founder, Dmitry Svetlov, said, even before our country started the war, we walked the fine line working with topics that can get someone criminally prosecuted in Russia. Nowadays, it has become especially obvious how relevant the topics raised in our game are. Many problems of today's Russia lie in the social political infantilism that has been hammered into its citizens over the centuries. Humility, obedience, and patience are the main virtues imposed by the Orthodox culture. So it's not surprising that the institutions such as the Russian Orthodox Church have recently become one of the primary weapons of propaganda, calling on parishioners to die for their homeland and preaching a monstrous indifference to one's own and other people's lives. So incredibly powerful, put themselves in huge, not just financial risk, like literal, health risk as well, taking this stance. At the same, he decided, and the studio decided to uproot everybody's lives and just say, hey, we're moving out of Russia. This is getting rough. So the entire studio, I think it was like 16 people, at the time, moved their whole lives and moved to Kazakhstan. So they are not a Russian studio anymore. They felt very strongly against what was happening, and they were like, we need to tell this story. And the backdrop of this game, with him saying those things, really painted a very vivid, this INDIKA is not just a argue against the Eastern Orthodox Church. It is also a political story of Russia, and it's like, wow, that's I love when creators have huge things to say, and this INDIKA had a huge thing to say, even if you ignore that portion, and now it even becomes even bigger. 11-bit really Studios, feeling a little bit uneasy about the whole relationship and all these things, decided to open up a donation for Ukraine, the children of Ukraine. They did a flat $50K donation. They just, no questions asked, put $50K, and also donated the proceeds of a week's worth of this War of Mine. They just said, they marketed it, say, hey, if you buy this War of Mine this week, it'll all go to Ukraine, and they made $850,000. So $850,000, yeah. It was so awesome. Publisher, Awesome development.
Shout out to them.
Studios. They deserve good stuff.
Was that so? That was the that was the
Yes,
publisher. That was
11-bit
11-bit Studios that raised
I
that money.
imagine that Odd Meter uprooting your life from Russia to Kazakhstan is probably not a cheap not a cheap endeavor.
They had a lot going on.
So I don't hold it like this is 11-bit Studio did
Yeah, definitely not
cultural
simple.
impact. This part is going to be very short because, like we said, the game came out this year, brand new. There is one Game Awards that apparently already gave out their awards, the Knicks Game Awards. I'd never heard of them. I tried to look into them.
Well, the Game Awards just happened too,
That's happening on Thursday, I believe. Or was it last Thursday?
What?
I'm pretty sure it's on Thursday.
I thought it was last Thursday, but maybe
wow. We're at the Game Awards 2024 date. It is December 12th. So it is this Thursday.
Oh, no kidding. All right, my bad. I thought Balatro already won everything.
This is now a Balatro episode. No, I'm just
everything is a Balatro podcast. Let me be very clear.
I cannot wait till we do our Balatro podcast 5 years in the future when nobody's talking about it. Anyways.
Yeah, everybody will be playing Balatro VR. You are the Joker.
So as I was saying, it did win a couple of awards, Knicks Game Awards. I'm not 100% sure the gravity of that. They won the Best Narrative and the Game Beyond Entertainment Award, which if there was any award that I would give INDIKA, Game Beyond Entertainment it's a good one.
Yeah.
It's also been nominated.
Absolutely.
All these nominations, the cat is not out of the bag. We don't know if they might have won these by the time that this comes out. Game of the Year at SXSW, South by Southwest. I realized I was reading. I was like, nobody calls it SXSW. What am I doing?
I was like, what's going on? I thought you were like doing like an SSX tricky type joke. I didn't know where you're going.
Yeah,
with that
after
one.
I was reading, I was like, what am I doing?
You got me
what
shocked.
am I doing?
Yes, nominated for Game of the Year at South by Southwest 2024,
which is going to be announced in March 2025. Best Indie Game at the Golden Joystick Awards. That one also actually got released, but that fired. And you buried the lead. They lost to Balatro, which is fair.
I just knew that. I guess if I had scrolled down, I would see that it's TBA for the Game Awards. But I did know that Balatro already won a bunch of stuff. I also think it's kind of crazy that there's Game Award shows, like Game Awards, that are firing in 2024 for 2024.
Seemed a bit weird. I'm assuming that next year's would consider anything that came out in November and December, because otherwise you're kind of screwed out of an award if you release a banger in December.
Is Indiana Jones and the Great Circle going to get panned at the Golden Joysticks because it came out this week or last week, and everybody's raving about that?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, we will see in our next episode. Put Final Fantasy.
This is now an Indiana Jones podcast.
This is now an Indiana Jones podcast. And like you said, the Game Awards, it is nominated for Games for Impact, which I personally feel like I did not look at the other nominations. I feel like they're kind of without even looking, I feel like INDIKA is kind of a shoo-in for this. I'm kind of surprised that INDIKA didn't receive more. As we will see in the verdicts and the spoiler free, I don't think that this might. I understand why it didn't get as many nominations for Game of the Year, but I am surprised that it didn't get a bunch of more nominations in other categories other than like Impact or Indie. Like storytelling, I'm surprised that it didn't get mentioned for storytelling in the Game Awards or the Joystick Awards or anything like that. Because it seems a bit weird.
I felt like INDIKA really slid under the radar for me. I did not hear about it. So I'm looking at the Game Awards right now on their nominees for Games for Impact. So it's Closer the Distance, INDIKA, Neva, Life is Strange, Double Exposure, Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2, and Tales of Kenzera Zao. Of those, I heard of Neva, Senua's Saga 2, and then Tales of Kenzera.
Out of those,
significantly
I've only
leading up to
I've only
this.
heard of Neva, and if you've seen my backlogs, I'm not much of a fan of goodies, so I'm probably not gonna play Neva. So yeah, I feel like Indica must win, or we riot.
I wouldn't be mad if Hellblade. I didn't play Hellblade 2, but Hellblade 1 was unbelievable. That was another really great, like, so that was a huge surprise for me playing Senua's Saga the first time. So, I mean, I haven't played enough here to speak of it. I am shocked that they're still making Life is Strange.
I thought
games.
that Double Exposure was a remake, though. I thought, like, am I wrong? I
it
think
really?
Double Exposure, is it Life is Strange? Oh God, we're giving you a lot of
I'm
work
also Googling
here.
it.
No, October 29, Double Exposure, episodic direct sequel. No, it's a direct sequel. Never mind, I was wrong. All right.
Yeah, I guess that's I don't know. I didn't play a lot of Life is Strange when I was younger, but I know a lot of people love it, so it's anyway, this is not meant to be a Googling award panning podcast.
Our bad, Fear. If this is your first time here, sorry. There's a lot less typing usually. But anyways, Steam sales numbers. You know I love my Steam sales numbers. 2.7 million in gross revenue. Yay! 150k units sold. Yay! And this is only Steam numbers. So PS5 and the Xbox Series X-S. Hate having to say that. Yeah, so with that, let's hit our spoiler-free verdict and then hit the spoilers.
Yeah, absolutely. My spoiler-free verdict is I personally think that this is probably my game of the year as far as like a game that came out in 2024 that I played, which is not many, but there's more than zero. It's easily the game of the year for me. And then if I include other games from other years in stuff that I've played, it's kind of between this and... I mean, it's probably between this and Nier at this point.
That's a good month for you.
And it was a good month for me. Well, we didn't play Signalis this year. That's the problem. We played Signalis at the end of last year, and that would take the cake for me. But well, it's an incredible game. It's truly a humbling experience to play a game like this because there's so much care and effort that went into such a short period of time. It reminded me quite a bit of playing through Journey for the first time, where it's like, it reminded me that we can do so many new things with games and we don't have to limit ourselves to what's been done, and we can use the tools that have come already to really take new angles and express new directions in just gaming as a narrative medium. I found it to be a really incredible experience. Narratively, it's great. It's a little heady. So I think if you don't if you don't want something like really thoughtful and pensive, and you want like something a little bit lighter heart or later fare, this is not for you. But I would wholeheartedly recommend it. It's 4 hours. Give it a shot, and if you fall off, you supported a great cause.
My spoiler-free verdict, my one sentence review that I posted in some places was Indica is what would happen if A24 made a video game.
Nice. Hell
A24 is a very well-known, both famous and infamous publishing house for films. And I love A24 films, but I do understand that it's not for everyone. I think that Indica is definitely there for anybody who is an enfranchised gamer, who is interested in video games as a medium, video games as an art form, video games as we want to, as a medium that is coming of age. I would say at this point, it's not coming of age. At this point, it's now entering middle age.
It's exhibiting its maturity.
Exhibiting its maturity. I think that this is a really good game to analyze. If this game was longer than 4 hours, I probably would have to put a lot more caveats and make it like not be as good of a recommendation. But it is such a nice, 4 hours. There's some movies that are 4 hours. People binge Lord of the Rings Extended Edition trilogy in one day. You can do 4 hours and it's going to be a great experience. I think that I would recommend this to almost anybody who is that type of person who really wants a thoughtful thing. If you're looking for more of an interactive or entertaining piece of content rather than a piece of content that has a story to tell and one that will make you uncomfortable in some situations, Indica is not the game for that. If you're looking more for lack of a better word, a more gamey game, I wish we had a better word to kind of like say. I think interactive is the closest I can get to what I'm trying to indicate. A game that essentially has you in the forefront and you are doing something and you are directly interacting,
like an active participant.
Active participant with the game mechanics and the interaction. The whole sole purpose for this work is for you to engage with an interactive medium. Indica is not necessarily there for that. But yeah, I love it. I really liked it. I'm really happy that I only played 2 games in 2024, 2 games that came out in 2024. It was this and Paper Mario 1,000-Year Door remake. So that doesn't even count almost. So I'm glad that if I had to choose one game to have played this year from 2024 in the year that it came out, that it was this one.
Nice. That's great. Well, thank you for joining us. If you're leaving us, we are heading into the spoiler section. So enjoy your time with Indica. You can turn this podcast off and probably get halfway through the game and decide if you're returning it on Steam or not before we finish our spoiler section. So good luck with that. Find us on Discord. Find our links to everything that matters in the show notes attached or below. And if you have any questions, just hit us up in Discord. We will certainly be chatting about this, as I know we have more than a few people that hang out on our Discord that have a lot of strong opinions about stuff like religion and nuns specifically. Maybe, I don't know. We'll find out. But anyway, thank you for joining us. We will be spoiling the game now.
Okay, so this is where normally we would explain the plot and the story and all these different things, but I'm not gonna hold together the great giant cliffhanger of what was the game mechanic or the puzzle.
Yeah, let's get right into that, please.
Because I know that a lot of people are curious. It's what I call the prayer puzzles. And I was trying not to bury the lead. There's technically 2 of these in the game. It is the only, I think, maybe puzzle that repeats itself, unless you count moving a piece of furniture so that way you can climb on it to get somewhere else. So the prayer puzzles are these momentous times in the story where Indica's faith is very much incredibly tested. Your face says everything.
Yeah, I was like, what are you talking about? And then, yeah.
Let me explain what the prayer puzzles are first in a bare terms, and then explain why I think it's such a damn, this is genius. This is who somebody fell to the ground, hit their head, and saw a vision of this puzzle. So the way that it works is that there are certain parts where the ground, the world, the environment twists around you. The lighting turns red. A fissure breaks in the middle of the ground, showing the fires of hell, and the little platforms that you're supposed to pass, that you're supposed to get to the next place, is broken apart. And the world, and through all this, the devil is giving one of his rousing narrations, and he's testing you and talking to you and laughing at you.
So unsettling. And he's just
so good.
You feel so weak.
It was so good. And here's the kicker. Oh boy, the kicker. You have a prayer mechanic in which if you hold the left trigger, you will start praying. And whenever you pray, the world comes back to normal and you do not hear the narration. The narration continues. Whenever you let go of the prayer again,
such a good feature.
If you miss something, you miss something. You are trying to it's kind of like trying to go la 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 la. I can't hear you. It's essentially that, but as a game mechanic. But here is the double kicker. You need to listen to solve the puzzle. The puzzle becomes you deciding when to pray to join the world together and when to stop praying, so that way the world twists around you in a way that is beneficial for you to get to the next point. Yeah. And that in of itself is already okay, this is cinematically looks amazing and makes a lot of sense and everything. But then that whole ludonarrative resonance of, oh, whenever I pray, I need to, one of the, I guess, to talk a little bit more about the plot and about the Indika's character arc is her accepting that this is a part of her, that there is no shame in her being herself. There is no shame if she doesn't want to be a nun and just be a normal human with like desires and with sin, as the church will say. It's okay. That is 100% okay. And the game forces you to interact with that. It forces you to say, hey, you can't just shut down the story. You can't just ignore the world around you and go and hide in a convent and everything will be fine. You are forced to interact with the world around you, and you must be able to go between this like good and bad to move forward in life. The world is not wholly black and white. You need to live in that spectrum of gray, or otherwise you'll never live to your full potential. You'll pretty much live in shame and guilt and all these things. And that puzzle, essentially that puzzle was the puzzle that was like, holy, this is such a, and the first time it happens like in the first like 45 minutes to an hour, somewhere around there. So I was
shocking. It's so shocking.
It's shocking, and I was excited. I was like, okay, this is it. This is the game mechanic that the developers have been building up to, and for the rest of the game, it's going to be like, it's only I knew it was going to be 4-hour experience, so I knew that there weren't going to be that many, but I expected it to be like maybe 4 or 5 of these. So maybe 1 every hour, maybe 2 every hour, and that this is going to be the core message of the game, is going to be through these scenes where you are forced, the mechanic is narratively like entangled with these mechanics to such an extent that there is, if you were to make this game mechanic in another game that isn't about a nun fighting for her like wavering faith, it won't hit
her
salvation. And so it is to my shame that this only happens twice in the whole game.
I think it's so perfect because I also love these, and the fact that it only really truly occurs once she absolutely has a full break with her own internal logics. Once her own internal logics and reasoning is at its highest, at its most incredible odds with her faith and her training and the expectations she places at herself, is when the ground literally breaks apart and threatens to swallow her up. When she can no longer talk or convince herself out of these states of deep trauma and has to just confront it, when the voice in her head, when the devil in her head is the loudest, is when she has the least, is when she needs the most support. And she leans on the only the only crutch she has, which is at this point the religion. She's lost her relationship with her father. Has no friends at the monastery, and almost. And I think both times it happens, she's not with Ilya.
The first time it happens, the inciting,
she's trying to get to him, and he went through the other side.
No, it was before you even meet Ilya. Is the first time it happens. It is in fact, the first time it happens,
it's in the meat house.
No, that's the second time it happens.
It's in the slaughterhouse.
That's the second and last time it happens. The first time that it happens right after you ford the river, and you're in this cave system, and you essentially are mad at the river man, the river fairy, who's supposed to help you, who's apparently like almost her only friend, kinda, and she also, or they also, I don't know if they're male or female, they also abandon her. And that's the first time it happens, unless there's something hidden in the game that is like multiple endings where you could unlock different. I don't think it's that type of game, but
now I'm very curious actually, because I don't remember you're saying it happens in the caves after she fords the river?
Before.
Okay, I think that I remember that.
Before you,
and then she
meets you, before you find the train, which we will go into the story a little bit more, but
yeah, I mean, if you're here, it's a 4 hour long game. I don't think we need to really rip apart that. We don't need to go that far in, but it's so in the cave system, and then the slaughterhouse.
And the slaughterhouse. The reason
there's one more at the end of the game.
No, there's a fun puzzle, a Escher-esque puzzle, but it's not a prayer puzzle.
Before the mirror room, she has to climb a tower, and then there's a room at the top and I remember going red, and she has to pray in and out. I could almost swear there was three.
If there are three of them, I would need to maybe your memory is more than
very
mine,
interesting.
but it could also be that the game is playing tricks on us, and there is a way to skip that one, and I accidentally skipped it. But at least from my perspective, I thought there were only two. But regardless, 2 or 3, I think 3 I would forgive it a little bit more, because then at least it's 1 per hour, or 1 at the hour mark in between every one of them. And it also plays around with, Jesus got tempted 3 times in the gospel kind of deal.
Okay.
Like 3 would have made a lot more sense, and I would have been like, it didn't really hit that you were trying to say that, but I will forgive you for trying. But for me personally, I think it was only 2, and I was in my playthrough, it felt like it was only 2, and I was very severely disappointed, because that's not the end of the puzzles. There's still other puzzles. It's just that they're very one note, very straightforward puzzles, except one. There's one other one that is actually, I mentioned it already, the Escher painting type puzzle.
The mirror room.
There's one of the puzzles where when you go through a room, you re-enter that room, but you're re-entering that room on its side. And then whenever you go again through the room, and you re-enter the room upside down, and you go up in loops. And the big reason that they did this, or what I felt is the big reason they did this, is because the one and only jump scare happens in that puzzle.
Yo, for real,
in that puzzle room. And it's not even it is on purpose, definitely, but it isn't a movie or video game jump scare like Five Nights at Freddy's, where it just jumps at you at the face. It is you're walking, and then all of a sudden, as you're entering the next room, you notice in the corner of your eye, like this weird moving thing. And you're like, what the fuck? And then you keep on moving, and you see, and as you're playing, you realize more and more, you can kind of see it more and more and more. And it's not because the game is letting you see it more and more. It's because after a while, you might realize that it's actually mimicking your moves. So you double back, it's mirroring what you're doing. And so you can get in positions where you get to see the monster, and the monster is the devil. It is just like, it is essentially, you are now starting, as the more that INDIKA loses her faith, the more the devil is being more corporeal and more like in visions. Because the devil, that's probably the first time I think you see the devil. That is, which is like 3 hours. I think that's like correct. It's very late in the game, if not even more than 3 hours.
That's towards the end of the game, and it's. That was such a jump scare for me too, but I guess just to linger on these prayer puzzles a little bit more, it did remind me a little bit of some like more cinematic puzzles in Senua's Saga Hellblade, the first one. So I think there may be some ground being tread again. However, I do really appreciate how entangled these puzzles are with the way the narrative is woven, and the fact that it's prayer, that she sort of resents this religion, and she resents this culture that she's been that has done her no favors, that has done her no justice, and still it's the only thing that she can rely on. And as the gamer, you're forced to actually be a gamer in these moments and like figure out the solution and listen to what the devil's saying and look around, and like you like there's no brilliant over the top way around it. Like, it's just a puzzle. It's a gamified puzzle that you have to solve. So I think that's quite interesting.
It is definitely the peak for me for the story. Like, it is essentially the maybe not necessarily the only thing, but it is definitely the thing that has the most. This is a game. You could never do this in a movie. Like, you can say a lot about INDIKA as, this could have been a movie. This could have been a movie. This could have been like whatever. stuff like that, puzzles like that, make it very apparent. Actually, no, this had to be a game. This was the medium to which best to tell this story. It's
Yeah.
great. I love it.
I on that point, I want to discuss these pixel
Sure.
flashbacks, these like pixel game flashbacks, because as I was thinking about the game today as I was getting ready, doing whatever, getting ready for this podcast, and something that struck me is this idea of painterly design or painterly aesthetic. Are you familiar with this idea in art?
Maybe. Could you?
So painterliness is basically just this idea that there are like visible brushstrokes in the final work, that the result of applying paint, this is from Wikipedia, the result of applying paint in a manner is not entirely controlled or generally without closely following carefully
Yeah,
drawn
like
lines. It
surrealism
is
or
not
abstract.
or impressionism,
Impressionism,
expressionism, abstract expressionism, Van Gogh, Matisse, stuff like that. So we're all familiar with this idea of painterliness. It's when things aren't extremely photorealistic and perfect or whatever. And these moments of retro, like pixel gaming, to me feel like the equivalent of, I don't have a good word for this, so I came up with gamerliness.
Yeah.
And it sounds awful, but it's the closest I can get to what I'm trying to describe, which is the sense that the artist is showing that this isn't a fully perfectly polished video game. Like, this is a video game that's wearing its gaminess on its sleeve. It is not a game that is eschewing being a video game in ways that I feel like Uncharted, I think, can be a little in this space. Like Naughty Dog games can kind of be in this space where they are aware that they are games, and they kind of deal with that, but at the same time they don't wear it so brazenly on their sleeve like Indica does. And I think in moments where you're leveling up your faith, in moments where you're gathering like this random currency that equivalates to XP on your faith tracker, on your progression meter, I think these retro games are a really interesting way to tell a flashback, in that we get fully pixelated cutscenes, we get fully animated like pixel like mini games, and the game is asking you to explore these spaces and see the world through her eyes as a pixel mini game, in the same way that as gamers who are, like, at least for us in our 30s, as more experienced gamers, maybe when we think of our childhood in games, we are going to regress to this idea of pixel games, right? Like, that's just what we had. And so I think there's a really interesting dichotomy there between the audience, at least our audience, you and I, and what's going on with Indica as she flashes back. But at the same time, I think it's a really cool way to show off how Indica is exerting this lack of perfection in, there's all these pixel mini games that are creating a sense of like retro feels, a sense of like a return to nostalgia. Almost.
That's the key thing I want to say. Nostalgia is probably the key thing.
Yeah. It's this huge nostalgic like hit, like right off the top when you first find it. And especially these days, where I feel there's a sort of artistry associated with pixel games, where they're either considered kind of like cheap and indie, or small, or like extremely well done and high art in a way. There's like this I like this lionization of pixel art lately, and this is playing in that space. But at the same time, it's like you're playing a video game, and now you're doing the most video game thing you could do, which is literally like playing Frogger.
One of them is Frogger, one of them is a racing mini game, one of them is a platformer. It's very gamey, very much so.
Yeah, like the most like quintessential like 2D pixel games that you could possibly imagine. And yet at the same time, it's telling this story of Indica's past, which led her to the nunnery, to the monastery. And it's tragic. It's like this tragic story that I think in any other time, in any other place, is a rather cute, like, teenage love story. And in fact, it's a rather tragic, painful moment of Indika's past where Indika meets Mirko and falls in love with him, and they have sex, and he tries to steal stuff from her dad's shop so they can run away together, and she's not really saying no to him, but she's not really saying yes to him, and it really hit me hard watching him die and watching her deny that she knows him, and we don't get any more details after that. So it's just assumed that her father found out and sent her away to the monastery, and so she lied for nothing. It's just like very painful.
And she was already,
it's so hard.
And she was already had a fiance, betrothed. I don't know if did they eventually have fiance. The dad mentions that they're gonna meet.
They were betrothed. Yeah. She was engaged to be married.
So there's this level of like, she feels, it's not a level of like, it's both internal and external. Like she feels grief and shame, right? Like she had this commitment, so to speak, in parentheses, and not in parentheses, in quotation marks, because it is 19th century Russia, so the father probably set up the marriage.
It was an arranged marriage from the get-go. It's very obvious that it is, and it brings up all the questions of marrying for love that are pretty typical in these arranged marriage.
But in a Disney movie, they would have ended together. Literature. Here, they wouldn't. They did not end together. And in fact, it also gave an opportunity, I feel like, to the artists to probably do the goriest scene in the whole game to be in pixel form. So that way,
I think that's so smart.
So that way they didn't need to like do the viscera of getting your guts blown out by a shotgun.
I mean, the boy was cut in half.
Yeah. They took some liberties as to what a shotgun will do to you.
True.
But it is incredibly gory, but it's pixelated, so you don't really, you feel the emotional impact, but obviously you don't feel the viscera and the physical like of it. So it's even in this arguable murder, you feel like there is some level of Indika remembering thing, not the murder nostalgically, but also putting that filter of pixelation.
Yeah. She's absolutely filtering her trauma and her guilt and her shame through the same lens of like, it was literally a different era. It was a totally different era that this happened in, and now she's reaping the results of it. And I think seeing that when Mirko dies is the last pixel mini game, the last pixel scene we get, and then it comes to, we play through the end of the game up until a really horrifying act at the end of the game when she gets captured. The priest gets killed as Ilya is trying to, like, basically steal the Kujets.
Which is, by the way, the first time we mentioned Ilya, so I don't know if you want to mention who he is.
Yeah, so Ilya is a escaped prisoner. At the beginning of the game, we come across a handful of people that are from a prison train that was apparently derailed by people by the prisoners trying to escape. And we find a runaway prisoner with a septic arm, and he demands that Indika basically traffics him to escape his captors. And she's very excited by this. It's like the most exciting thing that's ever happened to her.
Which is, by the way, this is the first time she's left the convent in presumably years.
In a while.
Like it's been a while. And the reason she left was because she was sent on a mission to deliver a letter to somebody else. And there is a bit of a question at the beginning of like, okay, why did they choose her? They obviously don't like her. They obviously have been avoiding sending her out on missions and stuff like that. And there is a reason, but I want you to finish your thoughts before we get to that reason.
Sure. So Ilya and Indika go through basically the entirety of the game, running from mad dogs and jumping onto trains and navigating their way through like a really creepy and unsettling fish packing factory and all this stuff in the quest to get to Spasov, where the Kudzets are being showcased, which is supposedly a very powerful holy relic.
Going back to that Eastern Orthodox idea
Right.
of just there's power in this relic to the point that they don't even need to see anyone. They just need to touch and pray to this thing.
Kiss it and pray. And there's, of course, I'm sure there's a charge associated with accessing Kudzets.
Yeah, probably.
I doubt it's free. And these relics are go on tour throughout the country, blah, blah, blah. So Ilya and Indika end up in Spasov, and they get there, and they have to sneak into the temple, and they do so. And through a series of events, the priest that is there with the Kudzets gets killed by one of the town guardsmen, as a result of what Ilya and Indika are doing, directly what Indika's doing. But there's a question of like they're being extremely irrational. The priest is being extremely like. Is he being rational?
Essentially,
is he being irrational?
It is the final act of Indika doing something religious, practically. Like, the reason that it happens is that Indika confesses to the priest within holy contract of confession that Ilya is a convict. He's on the run. He needs to see that he's a runaway prisoner and all these things, believing like she's been told the whole time that whatever is said in confession is between you and God. She can say that to him and they will take him to the Kudzets because he is a priest and she's being told this in confession. And the priest, for some reason or another, whether it's be because he's corrupt, whether it be because he's afraid or whatever, asks for a guard to come. And then in the tussle and all these things, there's a misfire and the priest gets shot.
Yeah, priest gets killed. Indika and Ilya get arrested, it seems. At least Indika gets arrested. She's defrocked, which is actually the contents of that letter.
Which
so
I didn't know what that meant. So I'll tell people.
Yeah.
Defrocked means essentially you've been banished from the convent or from you.
It's like
excommunication from the holy order. So you cannot be a nun anymore. You cannot be a priest anymore, or to remove of your holy ranks, essentially.
Yeah, and I think thereby that's going to remove one of your holy sacraments. All that being said, this ends up with Indika in a prison cell. I will put a content warning at the beginning of the episode for everything, but she is sexually abused by her captor, by the guard, the prison guard, supposedly in return for her freedom. He does not give her freedom, and then she traps him underneath a bookshelf somehow and escapes. And the whole reason I wanted to get here is because in conversation with these pixel mini games as these nostalgic remembrances of the past, and the third person over the camera view storytelling that we get in the very beginning of the game, the last sequence of the game is told from the first person point of view. And so I think it is so cool to watch the game go from this third person, over the shoulder, like Naughty Dog, very quote unquote modern storytelling style, walking and talking, like, all of the best narrative games of the last 2 decades or last decade and a half have really been. We move everything back to pixelated art and pixelated storytelling, like all of the great stories of video games past were told in our Final Fantasy VI's and such. And then we finally get this look into the final sequence where you are Indika, you are controlling her from a first person point of view. And so now you are no longer removed from the story. This is now you, the audience, the player, the viewer, are directly injected into the results of the story. Everything that you helped Indika do led you to this moment, and it's you who is sitting here having lost your way, lost your faith, lost your reasonability, and you walk out, you find a drunk Ilya, you found out that he pawns the Kudzets for nothing, for 3 gold or whatever.
5 rubles and a trumpet.
5 rubles and a trumpet that doesn't work or he can't play it, and you go to the pawn shop and you argue with the guy to get it back, and Ilya comes in and he's arguing with the pawn shop, and you're just sitting there with the Q-Jets. You can press X to kiss it, or shake it. You press X to shake it in an attempt to like shake the faith out of it, and the whole time you're standing in front of a mirror and all you see is your reflection, which is that of the devil. And you're just shaking it and shaking it and shaking it to get
indefinitely. XP. You can go as high as you want.
I got up to 11K.
I got up to 100K. It exponentially gets faster because you level up. You go through the skill tree and you do stuff.
Right. Well, that means you have to stop to level up.
Yes, I did stop to level up. I kind of wanted to see. This is just my game development brain getting into it. I kind of wanted to see what the max was, but what the limit was. I was like, I'm gonna hit 100K to see if that's the limit, and it wasn't. And I was like, I'm not willing to do this to 1 million. But I imagine that. I guess the maximum is the biggest number that you can make with a uint, which is in the millions. I forgot the number right now. So yeah, it's great. It's great.
I'm just like, I was so struck by this moment of just decision, this moment to move the camera into the first person and force me, the player, to be responsible for so intimately responsible for my actions. I can no longer remove myself through layers of just reality and simulacra in the pixelated flashbacks, right? Because I can't, that's art, that's a cartoon, that's children's game, like whatever. Like I can't, like that's not me. I'm not doing that. I'm just reliving the past. I have no control over these actions. And then we get to the present and it's like, I'm watching I'm watching INDIKA do this. I'm controlling her, sure, but like I've been taught by all these other third-person games, I'm experiencing a story that was laid out for me. And yet, when we get into the first person, I feel like we're now taking the culpability of INDIKA's actions one step further and saying, this is a reflection of you, the player, in the game. And I think it's just like such an incredible use of just perspective in video games that we don't often see. And I don't want that to limit us as far as like you can't tell culpable stories in the third person, or every first person story is meant to be like you, the player. I think there's an element of power fantasy typically associated with first person games. I think it's possible in any perspective, but I think of first person narrative experiences like Titanfall 2. And I think that there's a lot that doesn't feel like a game that's asking me to become culpable for my actions. That's asking me to be in the driver's seat of some really sick shit.
For me, it's just more of the fact that it changed, right? Like it could have been a third person and they didn't need to have additional controls or additional coding or additional all these different things. But the fact that they took the time to change the perspective means that there was a reason to change the perspective. And so it's one of those things of like
the smoking gun.
Like, oh my God, what are they trying to say with this? And that ending scene, there's so many different ways that you can read it. You can read it about you are now taking control and you're being that person. There is the culmination of the RPG XP idea that we mentioned as well. There's this, I don't know if they try to do this, but the way that you shake the cadets and the way that the character is looking at the mirror and the demon is there, it feels very lewd and very masturbatory the way that you're doing, because you're shaking this like phallic object. Well, not that phallic, but kind of phallic object, and out of the points.
No, it kind of is.
The points are coming out from the top of it, all these things. And so it harkens back to her original sin, so to speak, of sexual impropriety outside of wedlock. Yeah, it works it's multifaceted, everything that you could read into what it could be.
It's really good
I don't
points.
even know if that was the point. As we were mentioning in Nier Automata, that sometimes even the author isn't meaning to do things, but just because the author didn't mean it doesn't mean that it isn't valid interpretation of the work. I don't know if that was... There's not that many interviews with the writers and all these things. I couldn't find that much information about them. So the interpretive work, the interpretation is all we got. And I think that it is very powerful for this type of story.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I feel almost indifference to, not the word indifference, but I feel that there is a difference in the way that Yoko Taro wants to tell his stories in Nier Automata versus the way Odd Meter's telling their story in Indica. Not to say that your point isn't true. Your point's 100% accurate that, regardless of whether or not this was intended, it's up to us, the audience. Once it enters our realm, we can be the final arbiters of our own interpretations of any form of art, including Indica. But it does feel like there's a lot more deliberateness of what's being shown in Indica and what you're allowed to see and what you can interact with versus Nier, where it feels like there's such an intense focus on world building and exposure to so many different ideas, namely because Yoko Taro is so obsessed with this world that he has so many stories to tell within it that rather than go in depth on all of them, he's happy to populate a space with the results of many of these ideas. It's quite intriguing to kind of see how that logic of we are allowed to interpret what we see in front of us, this death of the author, and we can interpret it similarly but functionally very differently between Nier Automata and Indica, because they're both very curated experiences, but Nier is a game that really, really revels in its obfuscation, it revels in its abstraction, and it's very interested in expressiveness that we get from ambiguity. And Indica is a game that feels less interested in ambiguity and more interested in interpretive and iconic depth.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, a little bit. I kind of am getting a little bit lost in the sauce of like we're entering the Jason realm where it's scary here, and I am just an engineer. All I know is math and science, and we have entered the spirit realm, and I'm confused. That's how I feel a little bit right now.
Yeah, I get the sense. I get the sense that if you and I were to make a video game, it would go something like, Fran, we need to switch from the first person perspective to the third person perspective, and then I need you to invent the fourth person. You're gonna be like, I don't even know why we're going to the third. What are you talking about? And I'll be like, you don't understand.
I 100% that would be the case, but the type of developer I am, I'd be like, no, that's dumb. We can't do it. I come the next day. Okay, I kind of did it because it kind of sounded dope. So that's the type of
I figured it out.
That's the kind of engineer that I am. The producers love me.
So I don't know. I'm really, really enchanted with Indica, which is a weird way to put it because it's such a dark and dreary game, but the experience of playing it felt so refreshing.
Yeah.
Coming from Metal Gear Solid 2, I was really thinking like, did we make a mistake bringing the podcast back? Like, this sucks. Like, I am really not having a good time. Like, I was in like personal turmoil over like really just chafing with the game. And then we played Nier. I think I love video games. Video games are great. Why don't we always have podcasts about video games? And then we played Indica. I was like, video games are the best thing that's ever been made.
I think I have a very similar journey of, I do feel like you definitely had a much more visceral, emotional reaction to both these games than I did. It just happens to be I'm really bad at getting very emotionally invested. It's just a personal flaw. I'm sorry. Yeah,
it's who you are.
Yeah,
it's not a flaw.
Sometimes I feel like it's a flaw because sometimes I kind of do want to get emotional. I want to feel what other people feel, and sometimes I don't. But regardless of my my conversations with my therapist, I really did feel like I went on that same journey of I was looking very much forward to Metal Gear Solid 2. I didn't jive with it. I played Nier, and while I really liked Nier, at the end of the day, I also felt very much like I wasn't on the same page of like, this is a really good game. But at the end of the day, it is just a game to me, and not just a game because being just a game is so reductive. Like, it's a piece of work and a piece of art. But it didn't hit me as hard as it felt like it hit you, and it hit a lot of other people. And then this game, I kind of also am almost there, but this one had such a different cinematic narrative technical angle that I've never experienced, that it isn't a Signalis that actually left me in tears or left me broken. It isn't that, but it is definitely a game that I would be like, okay, this is a game that is definitely breaking new ground. If there were other games like this that have already done the things it's doing, then I would feel much more like metered in my recommendation. But this is like the first time a movie has colors, and the first moving picture that has colors, you are like, I must recommend this wholeheartedly because it's a new and different and of its kind. But now at this point, we have so many movies with colors. Maybe that movie isn't easy to recommend, but this time and age in 2024, this is very easy for me to recommend. Each passing year, if we see more of this, if Odd Meter knocks the next game that's going to blow our minds out of the park next year or in a few years' time, if that so happens, maybe Indica starts to lose its recommendation power. But as of today, the Francisco of 2024 in December, it is definitely a recommend for me.
Yeah, it's absolutely a recommend for me. I am extremely glad that we use Backlogged as regularly as we do, because I feel like this is a game that I could forget that I played, and I would be very excited to remember that I had this experience, and I mean, you can always go back and replay it, but it feels really important in the space of what can we do with cinematic narrative storytelling in a game. And it feels like it really peeled back the onion on what's possible in the space without going too far in one direction or the other. Like, I love me a visual novel, but those are very different experiences, and they don't play out like this. They don't feel very cinematic, but they can be very narrative. They can be like very narratively exciting. And in the same space that like the hyper like filmic or like the hyper like cinematography focused, movie focused, I'm thinking of those like the Quarry that came out a few years ago, like those horror like movie games. I forget what that studio is called, Dark something or other, but they are so interested in being a movie that I feel like they kind of miss the forest for the trees. And Indica is something that proves yet again that with a concise, clear vision and a clear execution, we can absolutely sort of find a masterpiece. We can create masterpieces, and we can do, and you know, it reminds me forever that it takes so many hands, it takes so many people. It's such a marvel that video games get made at all. And it's just equally still so impressive that something like Indica is here for us to sort of enjoy and feast upon and explore and be moved by and just have our thoughts intrigued by, because it just feels so much like what I wanted Immortality to be for me. I'll leave you with that note. That's the hot take I will leave you with. I also fell off of Immortality, and I felt like the experience I wanted from Immortality is what I got in Indica. And I think that if I was more into video editing, I would probably really love Immortality the way that so many people did.
I'm into video editing, and I could not. You do bring up a good point of visual novels and games that might as well have been movies and stuff like that. Fans of the show will remember that I'm not the biggest fan of visual novels. I don't think they're bad. They're just not for me. And being able to tell I was talking about games that are more interactive than cinematic, and if that's what you want, this is not really the game for that. I am that type of gamer. I really favor interaction and having that piece, because at the end of the day, it's a game. If you're not gonna give me that interaction, you might as well have been a movie. And so I think Indica hits perfectly that. Maybe it is the furthest I would go before I would start entering that like movie visual novel world where I'm like, I start getting friction. But this one is, I am so happy that an experience like this exists, that I can get that close. I can see it from over the fence and be like, I see why you guys love this. It's still not for me, but I can see that. I'll stay over here with Indica and enjoy it.
Well, I think your point's really important too. Something that gets brought up on Into the Aether a lot that I always found really impressive is that Brendan and Steven on that show, that's a great podcast. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. But one thing that they talk about a lot is over their 6 or 7 years of running that show, they have really explored their taste and used that show as almost an excuse to more deeply explore their taste in video games and media. And in the example of that show, Brendan came around on RPGs, and he didn't really like traditional like Japanese RPGs, Final Fantasy, stuff like that. He didn't really enjoy those so much as like a more Western style game or something like that. And over the course of that show, he really grew to love it. He's like a huge like Dragon Quest guy now. And I think it's so exciting to me that as we record this and we get to play games that you and I probably wouldn't normally go out of our way to pick up and play, that we get to sort of explore our taste and we get to know each other a little bit better, and it's really cool. It's a really exciting, like very refreshing feeling I'm coming off of Indica with, as opposed to Metal Gear Solid 2. Oh, rip Sons of Liberty.
All this to say, we are about to that this is all the opening to our Doki Doki Literature Club episode.
Sign me up. Let's fucking go.
No,
I'm in.
Like, that's the one that I started and was not able. But this is not a visual novel. I will play it for you, Jason. I will play it for this podcast.
If there's a visual novel we're gonna play to hard code you into visual novels, it's either going to be Paranormicite or it's going to be 13 Sentinels Aegis.
Okay, I have not heard of them, so
we'll cross
that bridge when we get there. But I guess with that, we're cutting it short. Unfortunately, this game barely had any items, so we'll get you the reminder.
I did collect almost all of them.
Wait, you did? You tried to go 100% completionist run?
I did try to do a 100% completionist run. However, I couldn't get the one in the mirror room.
I did not try. I was just vibes only. I'm gonna, if I see it, I'll do it, but I'm gonna just keep on jiving.
I think I lit every candle.
Wow.
So I did use my matches.
You did use your items.
All right. Well, I guess we kind of bungled that outro. So thank you for joining us, everyone. Pleasure, as always, Fran, working with you on yet another wonderful episode 19 of Use Your Items. Very exciting. Ooh. We're almost at the big 2-0. Soon we'll be able to drink. And yeah, I mean, you can find me on twitch.tv/useyouritems. You can check out the link tree below for any of my links on BlueSky, or any of Fran's links on BlueSky and Instagram and Threads and stuff like that. And yeah, check us out on I'm trying to be more active on BlueSky, so please follow us there. We have a lot of actually really great mutuals and other cool podcasts and stuff like that, so definitely recommend checking us out there. And in the meanwhile, we look forward for you to join us again, and please, whatever you do, do not forget to use your items.
Your items.
One day we'll have that down pat.